Hey guys, tonight we are going to unveil one of the most earth-shattering secrets of the French court, Queen Consort, Catherine de' Medici, the woman who stood on the brink of deposition simply because she could not conceive. She persevered through countless bizarre elixirs, even secretly observed her rival's private life to replicate every detail, until royal physician Jean Fernel revealed a never-before-heard method of conception. That technique not only erased all her failures, but also brought life to Crown Prince François II, heralding a glorious new chapter for the Valois dynasty. So, what exactly was that secret? Could this method still work its magic today? And would you dare to try something so unprecedented in real life? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what the local time is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Catherine de' Medici. Born Caterina Maria Romula de' Medici. They was born on the 13th of April, in the year 1519 in Florence, the capital of the Republic of Florence. She was the only daughter of Lorenzo de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, and Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, a princess of the Bourbon line related to many noble families in France. Her parents had married in the year 1518 as part of a political alliance between France and the papacy. But within less than 1 month after Catherine's birth, both succumbed to illness, Madeleine to complications of childbirth, and Lorenzo to plague, leaving her an orphan in the care of the Medici dynasty. Immediately after becoming an orphan, Catherine was taken to Rome under the protection of Pope Leo X, her father's cousin. There, she was placed in a convent to continue her upbringing and education alongside the nuns. At the same time, officials of the Holy See selected distinguished tutors to teach her foreign languages, Latin and Italian, history, theology, and courtly etiquette. The solemn convent environment instilled in Catherine discipline, keen observational skills, and a profound understanding of both Christian philosophy and Renaissance diplomacy. As for her lineage, the Medici family was one of the most powerful dynasties in Florence, renowned for patronizing the arts and sciences during the Renaissance. Her father, Lorenzo II, despite his brief rule, left a lasting reputation. Her mother belonged to the House of Auvergne, giving Catherine noble blood from both Italy and France. Nonetheless, she had no siblings and had to work diligently from a young age to establish her standing among the princesses of Europe. In the year 1530, at the age of 14, Catherine was selected as a candidate to marry Prince Henri, Duke of Orleans, the second son of King Francis I and Queen Claude of France. This marriage was arranged by Pope Clement VII, also of the Medici line, to strengthen the alliance with the French court, protect family interests, and enhance the political influence of the Holy See. The wedding took place in grand ceremony at Marseille on the 28th of October in the year 1533, with the light and rose ritual marking the rare occasion of an Italian princess joining the French court. Although the Duke of Orleans later favoured his mistress Diane de Poitiers, Catherine retained the position of Queen Consort when Henri ascended the throne as King Henry II in the year 1547. She was officially crowned Queen at Saint-Denis on the 10th of June in the year 1549. Under the pressure of life at the royal court, Catherine swiftly applied her Renaissance education, mastering the art of courtly persuasion, becoming adept at diplomatic correspondence, and understanding the psychology of the grandees. She maintained the habit of reading political works, most notably The Prince by Machiavelli, to develop strategies such as weeping before the king or staging a failure when necessary. Tactics that would later prove invaluable in turning the tide in her favour. In summary, Catherine de' Medici began her life as an orphaned Italian princess, educated in a convent. Born of Medici and Auvergne bloodlines, through her political marriage to Henri II, she became Queen Consort of France, This journey not only placed her at the pinnacle of power, but also equipped her with the resilience and skill to serve as regent, wielding real authority during the tumultuous period of religious wars and dynastic upheaval in France. Catherine de' Medici arrived in France under exceedingly adverse circumstances, although she was the daughter of the prestigious Medici lineage. She was regarded as a foreigner, the merchant's daughter, not of equal standing with the French royal family. When her husband, Prince Henri, later King Henry II, died, Catherine was elevated to the position of regent for her infant sons, yet by that time she was already over 40 years old, and her own children had yet to be born. Examining the timeline carefully, one sees that it was fully 10 years after her marriage before she gave birth to her first son. Provoking court gossip. A princess once expected to deliver a royal heir still could not conceive. Catherine's apparent infertility placed her at the centre of whispered rumours and debates about replacing the regent with another candidate more capable of producing a male heir. Factions at court began their behind-the-scenes manoeuvring, proposing more suitable matches, throwing the situation into ever greater disarray. Sadly, even King Francis I, who had overridden much opposition to marry her into the royal family, found himself torn as he listened to these rumours. In truth, Catherine was far from a frail woman. She had endured many hardships in her youth. Combining gentleness and finesse with ambition and boldness, qualities more than sufficient to see her through the harshest trials. As the threat of deposition grew ever more real, she recognized that only one daring solution remained: to employ every political stratagem at her disposal to sway those in power and restore their confidence in her. Aware that her fate hung by a thread, Catherine began to secretly devise a plan aimed squarely at the emotions of King Francis I, a man known to soften at moving displays to secure her position, and standing within the French court. At night, within the silent chamber surrounded by cold stone walls, Catherine quietly opened her copy of Machiavelli and devoured each chapter. Hunting for techniques to stir the hearts of her listeners, she carefully noted every counsel on crafting the image of the suffering victim, then stitched her notebook closed, laid it gently upon her pillow, and sighed as though on the verge of sleep. The next morning, while the nobility still lingered in drowsy stupor, she discreetly summoned a handful of loyal courtiers to a private conversation in the royal library. Amid the flicker of candlelight, Catherine spoke in a trembling voice about the misery of an infertile wife. Tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks as she choked out the court's cruel whispers. The father of my children, King Francis I, has sought every means to protect me, yet the tongues of rumour will not be still. I feel guilty, unfilial, unworthy. Her sobs were far from artificial. They sprang from a decade of silent anguish. Each tear that fell upon the wooden floor served as a poignant reminder of motherhood's value and her dynastic duty. Word of this candlelit lamentation swiftly reached the ears of court officials, causing those plotting her removal to pause their schemes. No one could bear to cast another stone at such a pitiable spectacle, especially given the king's known inability to witness a woman's tears. In the days that followed, Catherine maintained a gentle composure, offering no further complaints. Yet every gaze in the room was imprinted with her pain, an emotional victory that marked the first triumph of her strategy. But she did not stop there. Publicly, she petitioned the royal household to allow her to serve Princess Diane, the very woman rumoured to bear the heir should Catherine fail. Catherine artfully expressed her wish to become Diane's most devoted attendant, willing to endure any humiliation just to remain near the family. This plea both moved King Francis I and reminded him of his original decision. He had braved public opinion to choose Catherine as his daughter-in-law, dismissing many objections. Then, after her theatrical display of emotion, Catherine entered a period of quiet preparation. She adopted the maxim "silence is golden," minimized her appearances before the masses, and devoted herself to studying medicine and diplomatic ritual. She instructed palace attendants to lay fresh roses along the corridors, infusing every royal passage with their fragrance, subtly invoking the gentle strength of a resilient woman. 10 days passed in an almost uncanny stillness. While her opponents remained wary, Catherine secretly penned a letter to Jean Fernel, the royal physician, requesting permission to trial any remedy or method that might prevent further childbearing failures. Fernel promptly replied with an invitation to meet on a misty afternoon in the royal library, just the two of them amid ancient tomes. This clandestine gathering signaled the shift from emotional theatre to reproductive strategy, promising to elevate Catherine from a position of weakness to that of a true royal mother. And so, amid the damp shelves of the library, those weathered pages seemed to glimmer with newfound hope. Catherine learned to fuse medical insight with political artifice, preparing for a journey of self-transcendence that would restore the throne to her son. From this point forward, her life would turn a new page, as the woman once derided became a symbol of unwavering resilience for the Valois dynasty. In the midst of looming threats to her position, Catherine conceived of a daring plan to wield a most precious tome as her secret weapon, The Prince, by Niccolò Machiavelli, a work originally dedicated to her father, Lorenzo II de' Medici. Although her father had never accorded it more than a passing glance, Catherine carried the book with her from Florence to France and transformed its teachings into her guiding light for the art of psychological rule over statesmen. Night after night, in the hush of her private chambers, she pored over every stratagem Machiavelli proposed, learning how to penetrate the hearts of others, to manipulate public opinion, and to orchestrate emotional performances. She marked passages on 1 minute of tears can secure many years of calm, and cast a smokescreen before the public to conceal one's weaknesses. These principles she tested on herself, and then in her dealings with King Francis I. To her, they were the bedrock for the grand spectacle. She would soon enact a vulnerable, tearful display before the sovereign, the barest hint of theatre grounded in genuine distress. But Catherine did not act on impulse alone. Before the curtain rose on her planned tragedy, she methodically explored every crevice of power. She conferred in secret with favoured courtiers, reminding them of the dire consequences they would face if they persisted in whispers of her replacement. She encouraged loyalists to spread whispers of her unwavering devotion to dynastic duty, even as rumours swirled that she might be dismissed in favour of a more fertile candidate. In private meetings by candlelight, she cultivated her image as a heartbroken mother, desperate to fulfil her royal obligation, making her ordeal seem almost sacred. Each whispered tale and each pointed glance fed into the grand narrative drawn from Machiavelli's pages that tears, when shed at the right moment, could pierce the hearts of the hardest men. Catherine knew well that Francis I was not only a formidable emperor, but also a man who could scarcely bear the sorrow of a grieving woman. She had observed him comfort ladies of the court with tenderness, succumbing to compassion when they spoke of personal loss. Now, she would harness that compassion for her own survival. With precise timing, she arranged for a small audience, just the king and a handful of ministers, to convene in the royal study. There, unheralded by fanfare or herald's trumpet, she would let her tragedy unfold. On the appointed afternoon, a hush fell over the chamber as Catherine entered, ashen-faced and bent with sorrow. King Francis, seated before a low oaken table, watched in curiosity as she approached on trembling legs. She knelt, her skirts pooling around her, and allowed silent sobs to rack her frame. For a full minute she remained still, her head bowed, her fingers clenching at her skirts until her nails bit into the rich velvet. Then, in a voice choked with grief, she spoke of her terrible sin, the failure to provide a royal heir, and of the ceaseless cruelty of murmured criticisms among the courtiers. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she confessed her shame to the assembled lords, acknowledging that no woman was more unworthy of the Medici name, that she had failed both her husband's memory and her children's legacy. In that moment of unguarded pain, King Francis's stern features melted. His large hand rose to brush Catherine's tears away. The ministers, uncertain how to proceed, offered furtive sympathies. Their earlier resolve shaken by the raw authenticity of her suffering, Catherine's tears did more than move the king. They suspended all talk of her ouster. The courtiers, unwilling to be seen as unkind to a grieving mother, retreated in silence. Even those who had plotted in secret found themselves unable to advance their schemes. Catherine remained kneeling until Francis kissed her brow and bade her rise, proclaiming that no man would dare speak of replacing her, while she clung to her duty so passionately. In the days that followed, Catherine maintained a gracious composure in public, her earlier performance lingering in the memory of all who had witnessed it. She accepted consolations and small tokens of royal favour, a silk scarf embroidered with acorns, and a sprig of roses, each gift reinforcing her redeemed status. Behind the scenes, she continued to cultivate her allies, rewarding loyalty with gentle smiles and a whispered promise of royal gratitude. Thus, by turning Machiavelli's counsel into a living tableau, Catherine not only survived the gravest threat to her power, but also reaffirmed her indispensability to the Valois court. Her tear-stained appeal to Francis I became legend, recounted in hushed tones through candlelit corridors and echoed in later memoirs. She had demonstrated that, through a calculated blend of genuine emotion and political savvy, even an embattled regent could reclaim her place at the very heart of the kingdom's destiny. Just as the court began to buzz with renewed speculation about replacing Catherine, she decided it was time to deliver her final emotional blow. In the vast council chamber, before King Francis I and the assembled ministers, Catherine sank to her knees. She covered her face with trembling hands and unleashed a torrent of tears she could no longer contain. Her sobs echoed against stone walls as she choked out each word. "Father, I am guilty. I have failed to bear a prince, and I feel such shame. I beg you to dismiss these cruel rumours. Grant me one last chance. Let me remain in France, to continue receiving your grace, to serve Princess Diane, and even sacrifice my very self in gratitude." Catherine's weeping was far more than a mere act of piety. It was the culmination of painstaking study. Every hiccup, every quiver of her voice, every ragged breath she took, had been rehearsed countless times in the hidden galleries of the palace to guarantee the most heart-rending effect. When at last her final plea fell silent, King Francis I, hardened autocrat of all Europe, found himself unable to restrain his own tears. The sight of his daughter-in-law, willing to endure every indignity for the crown's sake, softened the iron in his heart. In that instant, he pronounced with unwavering conviction that no one would again speak of replacing the regent princess, and he commanded that peace be restored throughout his realm. For Catherine, the drama had secured her position for several more years, a reprieve amid a life teetering on the edge of disaster. Yet she knew, deep down, that this was merely a precarious balancing act. Her most urgent battle, bearing an heir to continue the Valois line, lay far from won. Despite the rare moments of fortune when rumour whispered that she might indeed be with child, the empty cradle persisted. Each day that passed brought fresh reminders of the fragile truce she had brokered with the court through tears and theatre. Catherine continued to attend council meetings with an air of gentle composure, never too eager to speak, never too withdrawn. She accepted the condolences of nobles with a soft nod, never overplaying her vulnerability. Too aware that her display before the king must not become a crutch for her rule, in private, she retreated to her chambers, poring over medical manuscripts, herbal compendiums, and the rare surviving notes of Jean Fernel. By candlelight, she examined recipes for fertility treatments, transplanting petals of French roses into tinctures and seeking counsel from midwives who whispered of secret folk remedies. Still, it was not enough. When days stretched into weeks with no sign of pregnancy, whispers began to stir again. Though never as loudly as before, Catherine's mastery of emotional politics had bought her valuable time, but time was a double-edged sword for a woman in her 40s. She felt the weight of every sunrise pressing against her window, reminding her that the clock of dynastic destiny never stopped its relentless ticking. Even as she grappled with her personal anguish, Catherine maintained her outward dignity against the backdrop of courtly banquets and dazzling fetes. She took care to cultivate an image of serene benevolence. She presided over charitable distributions of bread and wine to the city poor, her hand delicately extended as she offered alms. Townsfolk, who caught sight of her at dawn, emerging from the palace gates with a muffled sigh and a basket of loaves, whispered among themselves that the regent princess must possess a compassion born of profound suffering. Behind closed doors, however, Catherine's determination sharpened into a cold resolve. She commissioned discreet inquiries into the fertility records of other royal courts, seeking patterns she might exploit. She wrote veiled letters to powerful allies, Italian dukes, German princes, reminding them of past debts owed to the Medici and requesting their prayers and discreet support. When courtiers spoke of alliances and marriages, she steered conversations toward the importance of a stable succession, never letting slip her own fear that without an heir, all her political maneuvers might crumble. At night, Catherine would stand alone at her window, gazing across the silent garden where moonlight glimmered on rose petals. She would lay a single white blossom upon the sill, an unspoken prayer for purity, hope, and new life. And although her heart quivered with longing, she steeled herself for the next day's performance, knowing that every gesture, every measured word, could mean the difference between regaining her strength and losing everything. Thus, even after the tears that had moved a king, Catherine de' Medici's struggle persisted, a ceaseless contest between hope and despair, between political intrigue and the most personal of battles. In the hushed corridors of the Louvre, her story unfolded not as a simple tragedy or triumph, but as an eternity of poised tension, each breath carrying the promise or peril of a dynastic future, yet unwritten. After having weathered the storm of courtly intrigue, Catherine de' Medici turned her attention to the most personal battlefield of all, the quest for a child. With the same quiet determination that had guided her political maneuvering, she embarked on a campaign of hope and desperation, seeking every conceivable remedy to overcome her years of barrenness. She began by summoning renowned clergy from every corner of France, and even beyond its borders, to chant prayers and sacred liturgies in her chapel. In the hushed gloom of candle-lit aisles, monks in ash-brown robes intoned ancient hymns, enveloping Catherine in a veil of solemn supplication. Day after day, she knelt upon the cold marble floor, her silk skirts fanning out like exhausted wings, head bowed as the chorus of Latin psalms washed over her. Though no one could measure the potency of these rituals, Catherine clung to the belief that divine favour might yet smile upon her womb. When spiritual intercession fell silent, she turned to the alchemists of Paris. In a tucked-away laboratory filled with copper alembics and vials of strange liquids, Catherine commissioned experimental miracle elixirs. The glassware hissed with enchantment as they distilled petals of rare flowers and drops of mountain spring water. She drank each concoction with the reverence of a devotee, even braving the most baffling remedy, mule urine, said by some folk physicians, to hold the key to renewed fertility. On more than one occasion, Catherine felt her vision blur and her knees buckle under the mixture's fierce effects. Yet she pushed on, convinced that no sacrifice was too great in service of her dynastic duty. Still, the empty cradle remained a cruel testament to her plight. Undeterred, Catherine devised a covert operation worthy of her political exploits. She ordered a small team of craftsmen to bore a discreet hole in the ceiling of Madame Diane's boudoir, Henri's cherished companion, whose very presence symbolized his disfavor toward Catherine's cause. Each night, those craftsmen worked by the moon's pale glow, drilling a slender aperture through which Catherine could, from her hidden vantage, Observe the private intimacy between Diane and the king, crouched in a shadowed corner above the chamber. Catherine watched in silence. She noted every subtle turn of Diane's hip, every whispered encouragement, and every gesture that earned a tender smile from Henri. Over successive evenings, the secret watcher practiced each motion in the solitude of her own bedchamber, striving to harness the allure she believed had won Diane her husband's affection. In the stillness of candlelight, Catherine mimicked Diane's posture, rehearsed Diane's whispered sighs, and practiced the gentle arch of her back. To Catherine's relief, Henri responded more warmly than he had in many moons, offering hesitant compliments and fleeting glances of approval. She allowed herself a small measure of satisfaction, only to have it dashed when Diane remained childless herself, owing to the simple fact that she had long passed the age of childbearing. The clear implication struck Catherine like a cold wind. The issue was not with her methods or her will, but with Henri's own fertility. Her heart tightened at this revelation, for it meant that the road to motherhood would demand more than piety or mimicry. It would require true medical insight. This realization only steeled Catherine's resolve. She accepted the physical hardship of endless potions and the emotional strain of secret observation, believing that once the root cause was exposed, her ordeal would end. Yet fatigue settled in her bones like a heavy cloak, and the chamber walls seemed to lean in closer as she moved through her days with drowsy determination. It was at this critical moment that a new figure emerged upon the scene: Jean Fernel, the recently appointed royal physician, renowned throughout Europe for his scorn of superstition and his unwavering faith in empirical observation. Fernel had won King Francis I's ear with his insistence on rigorous anatomy and scientific method. He prolonged no ceremony when Catherine's plea arrived at his office. He replied with urgency, summoning her to a private consultation in his sunlit study. On the appointed afternoon, Catherine, weary yet hopeful, made her way through the palace corridors. She paused to inhale the faint scent of rosewater lingering on the tapestries before entering Fernel's chamber, where shelves cradled jars of dried herbs, medical diagrams, and skeletal models. Fernel welcomed her with a curt nod and gestured to a sturdy oak table. "Madam," he said in tones as measured as his pulse readings, "we will leave behind prayers and potions. Today, we will seek the truth within your body." And the Duke's, his words, though clinical, carried a weight of promise. Catherine, her lids heavy with anticipation, managed a faint nod before settling onto the examination couch. Fernel's approach was both scholarly and precise. No incantations or elixirs passed his lips. Instead, he methodically reviewed Catherine's history, then directed a gentle palpation of her abdomen. At each touch, Catherine stifled a wince. Recalling the burns of past tinctures, Fernel took notes in a pristine journal, consulting anatomical charts pinned to the wall. After a series of measurements and assessments, he set aside his pen and faced Catherine. "Madam," he began, "your physiology appears sound. The difficulty lies not within you, but in the union itself." He explained that Duke Henri's condition, a rare congenital hindrance, might impede natural conception. Catherine, lulled by the soft cadence of his voice and the faint ticking of the clock, I felt the world tilt beneath her. Fernel proposed a curious remedy, not a potion to drink, nor a prayer to recite, but a change in their approach during intimacy, a variation designed to accommodate the Duke's condition. He described a specific posture, one rooted in anatomical logic, that he believed would maximize the chances of successful conception. While Catherine's eyes fluttered with drowsy confusion at the novelty of it all, she recognized, even in that moment of languid reverie, that true science might at last deliver her from this gauntlet of sorrows. And so, as candlelight danced on the vaulted ceiling and the hush of late afternoon drifted through the windows, Catherine de' Medici prepared to embark on the most intimate experiment of her reign. In the mingling scents of rosewater and old parchment, she found herself suspended between hope and exhaustion, ready to place her faith in a physician's prescription rather than the prayers of monks or the whispers of courtiers. The stage was set for a new chapter, one that promised either the long-awaited cry of a prince or the echoing silence of yet another night without an heir. Jean Fernel was summoned to the palace with the singular task of unravelling the mystery of Henri and Catherine's childlessness. In a chamber lined with medical charts and dusty vellum scrolls, he set to his work with scientific rigour, calling upon both Duke Henri and Catherine de Medici. He first conducted a detailed examination of each partner. He instructed Henri to lower his hose so that Fernel could inspect his genitalia. The physician's brow furrowed as he noted an innate abnormality that rendered natural conception all but impossible. Fernel paused to record his finding in a leather-bound journal, the quill scratching softly like distant rain in the silent room. Rather than prescribe medicines or propose surgery, Fernel unveiled a most curious prescription, a change of position during intercourse. Though the exact posture remains unrecorded in surviving manuscripts obscured by the prudish discretion of the era, contemporary notes describe it as wildly unconventional. The method demanded that both participants assume a pose that tested every sinew and muscle, requiring several intense sessions each night, until exhaustion set in. The instructions were delivered in a hushed tone, as if Fernel himself feared that even uttering them aloud would shatter the propriety of the court. Young and desperate for an heir, Henri and Catherine accepted these directions without hesitation. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of Catherine's bedchamber, perfumed with lavender and musk, they laboured through each prescribed arrangement. Candlelight flickered upon pale walls as the couple, breathless and weary, endeavoured to comply. Each attempt left their limbs trembling and their bodies heavy with fatigue. Yet neither spoke of faltering. The hush of nocturnal Paris pressed against the windows, bearing witness to their quiet perseverance. As weeks bled into months, the earlier rumours of soothsayers and sorcerers in the palace began to fade. Whispers of the monks chanting and the alchemists' vials gave way to a new narrative, one of scientific promise. Court physicians murmured about Fernel's method with respectful awe, and courtiers dared to hope that the Queen's suffering might soon yield to medical wisdom. The palace corridors, once filled with hushed scorn, now bore an air of subdued expectation. Then, in the year when Catherine reached the age of 24, the long-awaited miracle occurred. In the pale glow of dawn, a child's cry echoed through the royal chambers. Catherine gave birth to a son, who was named Francois, and who would one day ascend as King Francois II of France. The arrival of the infant prince transformed the atmosphere of the court overnight. Where once resentment and doubt had simmered, now celebration and relief flowed like spring water. Bells pealed across Paris, and lists of thanksgiving were published in every parish. But Catherine's story did not end there. In the years that followed, she bore 9 more children, fulfilling the dynastic hopes of the Valois line. Of those 10 royal offspring, 3 sons survived to adulthood: Francois, Charles, and Henry, who each, in turn, wore the crown of France. The palace nurseries, once a place of silent sorrow, became bustling with life and laughter. Catherine, who had known humiliation and despair, now knew the joy of seeing her sons grow into strong young men, prepared to inherit the weight of a kingdom. Catherine's journey from political exile in her own court to triumphant mother of kings stands as a testament to the true nature of power. It reveals that, when threatened, individuals will sacrifice both flesh and spirit to secure their place in history. Her willingness to endure every indignity of body and mind, to persist through prayers and potions, through secret observation and anatomical intervention, underscores a profound reality. The struggle for influence demands utter devotion, even at the cost of one's own well-being. And so, Catherine de' Medici fulfilled her dynastic mission, ensuring that the Valois succession remained unbroken. She emerged from the crucible of doubt and desperation, as both regent and mother of kings, a figure etched indelibly into the annals of history. In the soft hush of twilight, one might imagine her standing at a palace window, gazing out over a realm she helped to shape, her heart heavy with the memory of every trial endured and every victory won. After bringing Crown Prince François into the world, Catherine de' Medici might have believed she had reached the summit of her struggles. Yet in truth, that first birth was merely the opening movement of a far more intricate symphony of challenges: how to preserve the Valois dynasty's hard-won position against both foreign intrigues and internal conspiracies. At this juncture, her sons were still mere boys on the throne, and Catherine retained the regency. She was all too aware, however, that her authority would wane as her children matured and as those nobles who once opposed her found opportunity to strike. Recognizing this precarious balance, Catherine set about reinforcing alliances with families long loyal to the crown. While simultaneously sowing discord among rival factions, she established a clandestine network of palace informants, trusted servants, and discreet courtiers, tasked with overhearing hushed whispers of treason. When murmurs of rebellion surfaced, she deftly shifted blame onto her opponents by suggesting that their private counsels were in fact seditious plots against the young king. At the same time, she harnessed the fresh prestige of Prince François's accession, organizing solemn conferences and grand festivals to remind the populace of their sacred bond with the Valois throne. Yet Catherine knew that royal authority depended on more than courtly politics. It required the blessing of the Church. To that end, she invited renowned bishops and respected monks to undertake public sermons and to lead ceremonies of thanksgiving for abundant harvests. With each invocation of divine favour, Catherine wove a narrative that the Medici bloodline was under the special protection of the saints. The great sermons at Saint-Denis, the hallowed resting place of French kings, often swelled with thousands of faithful worshippers, to their collective prayers, serving as a spiritual bulwark against xenophobic slander. Amid these layers of political and religious strategy, Catherine never neglected her maternal role. She devoted herself to the education of her eldest son, recruiting gifted tutors to instruct him in the classical languages of Latin and Greek, in the modern philosophies of governance, and even in the subtle arts of Machiavellian statecraft. Under her careful guidance, the young King François II emerged as a prodigious scholar, his aptitude for debate and rhetoric earning the astonished admiration of his counsellors. By presenting her son as a learned monarch, Catherine deepened the people's emotional investment in the monarchy, and in her regency, Catherine's melding of flexible politics, strategic piety, and rigorous pedagogy achieved a remarkable equilibrium. While plotting her enemies' isolation in secret audiences, she enriched the spiritual life of her subjects in candlelit cathedrals. While behind the palace doors, she orchestrated rumours and counter-rumours. Outside the doors, she presided over festivals of pageantry and colour, each detail reinforcing the Valois claim. And in the quiet study chambers, she shaped her heir into a leader whose intellect would anchor the dynasty's future. Thus, thanks to her intricate blend of shrewd diplomacy, religious influence, and intellectual stewardship, Catherine did more than hold the reins of power during her son's minority. She laid the groundwork for the dynasty's endurance. The foreign princess, once derided as an outsider and criticized for her early failings in childbirth, had transformed into the steady fulcrum of France's monarchy. Her every move, whether in the flicker of torchlight during a secret council, the hush of prayer in a vaulted nave, or the measured instruction of a young king, revealed that authority, when wielded with both calculation and compassion, could secure a throne through the most turbulent of times. One of the next great crises that tested Catherine de' Medici's mettle was the rise of the Huguenot faction, French adherents of the Protestant faith, led by the formidable Lord Gaspard de Coligny. As reformist ideas spread across the kingdom, they demanded not only the freedom to worship, but also a share in governance. Catherine understood that if the Protestant nobles gained the upper hand, the royal power would tremble. Huguenot lords could very well depose her and topple the Valois dynasty. To counter this threat, She devised a strategy of political winds, stirring one breeze here, shifting another there to keep both sides off balance. In secret negotiations, she reached out to the Protestant monarchs of England and the cantons of Switzerland, carefully planting seeds of discord within the Huguenot leadership. At the same time, she covertly encouraged the most zealous Catholic lords to apply pressure, inciting sporadic outbreaks of violence to remind the reformists of the perils of overreach. In the vaulted cellars beneath the Palace of Versailles, Catherine arranged clandestine banquets where both Protestant and Catholic nobles were invited ostensibly to discuss peace. In reality, the guests returned to their courts, whispering rumours of assassination plots against the king and suspicions about each other's loyalty. Yet Catherine did not neglect the more overt trappings of faith. She commanded the restoration of Notre Dame de Paris, investing vast sums to repair its crumbling aisles and gild its wooden pews. Then, she extended an invitation to the pontifical court, urging the Pope to send a delegation to Paris, a gesture that reinforced the loyalty of Catholic believers. At the Sainte-Chapelle, she sponsored solemn preaching and commissioned the royal choir to perform antiphonal chants, filling the air with celestial harmonies. By weaving grand religious spectacle into the fabric of court life, Catherine turned faith into a soft power, binding her subjects' hearts to the crown through shared devotion. On the diplomatic front, she pursued alliances with staunchly Catholic powers to block Huguenot overtures abroad. She strengthened ties with Spain and the Papal States, exchanging royal betrothals and mutual defence pacts that signalled to Protestant agitators that any foreign intervention would be met with overwhelming force. Most notably, Catherine brokered the marriage of her brother, the young Duke Francois, to Princess Marguerite of the Habsburg lineage, a union of two great Catholic houses that served as an irresistible peace offering to both sides. The proposed dowry alone whispered to rival, even the wealthiest merchant houses, dissuaded the Huguenots from seeking support from beyond France's borders. These intricate manoeuvres succeeded in dampening the tide of Huguenot ascendancy during the decade of the 1560s. Though the peace she enforced was fragile, more a patchwork of uneasy truces than a lasting accord, it nevertheless showcased her formidable political acuity. Here was a woman once derided for her inability to bear children, now emerging as a stateswoman of international repute. She had managed to mediate religious conflict, exploit maritale alliance, and navigate the jagged shoals of factional intrigue to preserve a semblance of harmony in a deeply divided realm. In quiet moments, Catherine would reflect on the irony the same Catholic masses that comforted her soul also served her as instruments of control. The Latin hymns she had once found soporific now numbered among her arsenal of power. The silk vestments she draped over her shoulders on festival days concealed a mind ever calculating the angles of every alliance and the pulse of every faction. And so, amid the lingering scent of incense in Notre Dame and the hushed murmur of prayer at Sainte-Chapelle, Catherine de Medici held fast to her purpose. She had deftly balanced concessions and covert provocations, churches and ambassadors, banquets and treaties, to prevent any single group from seizing the throne. In the soft glow of candlelight, she imagined her realm as a great tapestry, each thread, whether Protestant or Catholic, woven in careful tension to support the whole. Though many would later criticize her methods as ruthless or duplicitous, a few could deny the results. A kingdom spared the worst collapse, at least for a time, and a dynasty preserved against threats both within and without. As the son she had borne in weariness sat upon his youthful throne, Catherine's quiet triumph lay in having transformed her own survival into the survival of France itself. And in the stillness before dawn, her weary eyes would close upon the memory of every alliance forged and every sermon preached, each a testament to her unyielding resolve and her mastery of power's shadowy currents. Although Catherine de' Medici had secured many victories political, religious, and dynastic, she soon faced the greatest crisis of her regency, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. one of the bloodiest religious atrocities in all of Europe. The spark had been a joyous royal wedding. Her daughter, Princess Marguerite, and the staunchly Catholic Cardinal of Lorraine, a member of the powerful Guise family, had united in matrimony before the court and country. That celebration was meant to seal a fragile peace between Catholics and Huguenots alike. Yet in the days that followed, a band of zealous Catholic assassins stormed the lodgings of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, leader of the Protestants, and brutally ended his life. In the wake of the murder, Charles swallowed Paris. Protestant houses were set ablaze, streets ran red with blood. Catherine found herself at a fateful crossroads if she sided with the Huguenots. She would alienate the hardline Catholics whose support she still needed. If she threw her lot with the Catholic extremists, she risked provoking a full-scale rebellion by the Huguenot minority. Catherine chose to leverage the situation. She persuaded her son, King Charles IX, still a youth haunted by rumours that his own mother, once incapable of childbirth, had somehow broken a curse to issue a royal decree ordering the suppression of the tumult in the name of protecting the throne and the innocent. In a low, tremulous voice before the court, Charles declared that any who defended the slain admiral or attacked Catholic worship would be considered traitors. Thus, the royal mandate unleashed a wave of violence that spanned from the narrow alleys of Paris to the quiet villages of the Ile-de-France. Thousands of Huguenots were slain, men, women, and even children cut down in churches, dragged into prison courtyards, or hunted through the moonlit streets. Though the massacre was deeply rooted in sectarian rage, even the most fanatical Catholics recognized the sheer terror of the Valois authority. Throughout the carnage, Catherine worked swiftly to conceal her hand in the slaughter. Advisors who suggested mass reprisal found themselves quietly reassigned or quietly dismissed. Whisperings of direct royal complicity were drowned out by the urgent need to restore order. She then set about rebuilding the monarchy's image of benevolence at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. She knelt beside the marble altar, her soft prayers mingling with the plumes of incense, offering supplications for the souls of the martyr saints and the innocent departed. To solidify this act of contrition, Catherine dispatched generous bequests to repair damaged churches and to fund memorial statues in the city's squares. She awarded lavish pensions and honours to the priests and monks who had sheltered fleeing Protestants or had poured charity upon the wounded. In hushed ceremonies, presided over by candlelight, she elevated humble clergy to positions of greater prominence, all while promoting the notion that the crown remained above sectarian violence. Bound by Christian charity, critics would later brand her the Queen of Blood, accusing her of cold-blooded cruelty in permitting thousands to die for the sake of power. Yet amidst the grief and outrage, Catherine once more demonstrated her indomitable will. Under her guidance, the apparatus of government was swiftly reorganized. Governors who had shown sympathy to the Huguenots were replaced by steadfast Catholic loyalists. Existing councils were reshaped with new hands that answered directly to her regency. Simultaneously, Catherine unleashed a renewed propaganda campaign, proclaiming that the greatness of the Valois crown transcended all creeds. Royal decrees commended unity in faith, while placards posted on Parisian gates urged citizens to see beyond petty differences in the face of national survival. Pamphlets, printed in quiet workshops, circulated testimonies of Catholic martyrs and Protestant defectors who had sworn fealty to the crown. To reach the common folk, peasants and townspeople already bewildered by bloodshed, Catherine ordered grain shipments and public works projects in the afflicted neighbourhoods. Bridges were repaired, wells refilled, and markets reopened under the watchful eyes of royal guards. Where there had been lawlessness and fear, a semblance of normal life returned. In village squares and guild halls, her name was murmured, not only with dread, but with cautious gratitude for having saved the realm from complete collapse. Even as embroidery of silk and the clink of goblets resumed at court, Catherine's sleepless nights persisted. In the throne room, she would watch King Charles preside over state affairs. His youth tempered by sorrow. She knew full well that her decisions, horrific as they seemed, had bought time for her sons and for France itself. Yet each dawn found her quietly reviewing the lists of the dead, counting the cost of every life lost in her name. Thus, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre stands as a grim testament to Catherine de' Medici's readiness to wield violence in defense of the dynasty. At the same time, her swift moves to conceal, to atone in public ritual, and to restructure her government reveal her extraordinary political dexterity. In the gentle hush of the palace at dawn, she understood that the power she had clawed back from the brink of dissolution demanded both ruthless resolve and the artful balm of mercy. In this balance between bloodshed and charity, she preserved the Valois legacy, ensuring that the crown would endure, even as the memory of its darkest days lingered like a faint, sorrowful lullaby. After the violence unleashed by the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, France plunged into prolonged instability. Yet, Catherine de' Medici did not falter. She recognized that the only way to secure a lasting peace was through the art of dynastic marriage. Thus, in the year 1570, she pressed forward with the union of her second son, Prince Henry, and the Archduchess Elizabeth of Austria, a grand alliance between the Habsburg and Valois houses. Preparations for the wedding at Fontainebleau consumed Catherine's every thought. For 2 full weeks, she supervised every detail, from the carving of ivory place cards to the glitter of the crystal goblets. She commissioned gowns of lavender silk for the ladies of the court and velvet doublets for the gentlemen, chosen to harmonize the colours of both dynasties. In the palace courtyard, she had a temporary stage erected where court players performed a pageant entitled Peace and Concord, its storyline carefully crafted to celebrate the fusion of hearts beyond all colours and creeds. On the morning of the bridal procession, Protestant envoys were granted the finest seats along the ceremonial route, an unmistakable gesture of royal tolerance. Beneath this lavish display, however, Catherine wove a web of unwritten conditions. She quietly informed Huguenot leaders that any breach of the peace terms would see their newly won privileges revoked. Simultaneously, she championed the creation of a court of reconciliation, where noblemen and religious delegates from both sides met to debate grievances in open session. Though many of these assemblies ended in stalemate, they nonetheless established a formal channel for dialogue, replacing the swift march to arms with the slower, murkier path of negotiation. While these political initiatives unfolded, Catherine extended her diplomatic reach beyond France's borders. She dispatched emissaries to Queen Elizabeth of England and to the Doge of Venice, exchanging letters brimming with courteous appeals for intervention in friendship should tensions flare again. This dual approach, marital diplomacy at home and goodwill missions abroad, served to fortify the Valois shield. In northern courts where Protestant powers once viewed France with suspicion, Catherine's carefully worded dispatches and visible hospitality began to rekindle a reputation for moderation and sophistication. Slowly, the royal household sensed a shift. Where once the corridors echoed with distrust and veiled threats, now a tentative calm settled over Fontainebleau and the surrounding provinces. Markets reopened their stalls without fear of siege, and the sound of lute music drifted from the palace gardens in the evenings. Catherine's image rose as the emblem of reconciliation, a queen mother who could weave alliances as deftly as she once orchestrated feasts. Yet in her private chambers, Catherine's mind danced with permutations of power. Despite the outward peace, she quietly mapped future alliances and calculated which noble houses might slip back into factionalism. She reviewed guest lists for upcoming festivals, noting potential envoys to invite or exclude. Each letter delivered in her hand bore her subtle emblems, a sprig of rosemary for remembrance, a folded ribbon in the Habsburg colours, symbols that reinforced her presence in every courtly interaction. Through the marriage of Prince Henry and Archduchess Elizabeth, Catherine achieved a diplomatic triumph that few could match. She had shown that even after the darkest storm of violence, a single union could offer the promise of harmony, The Huguenot magnates, now invested in the stability of the young couple's future rule, found themselves disinclined to provoke conflict. Meanwhile, Catholic hardliners received tangible proof of Medici influence at the heart of French governance. In the gentle hush of pre-dawn, Catherine would rise and gaze at her reflection in a silver mirror, soothed by the knowledge that her efforts had borne fruit. Yet she never allowed herself the luxury of complacency. For every peace treaty she inked, and every wedding she orchestrated, she continued to guard against upheaval. She had, after all, witnessed how quickly faith could fracture a kingdom when left to fester without a channel for compromise. Thus, Catherine de' Medici's deft use of matrimonial politics and international diplomacy not only quelled the immediate threat of religious civil war, but also laid the foundation for a more resilient monarchy. She proved that a woman previously scorned as incapable of childbirth could become a master statecraft, nurturing both heirs and alliances, ensuring that the Valois dynasty endured in an age fraught with sectarian peril. In this blend of ceremony and negotiation, Catherine found her greatest strength, guiding France back from the brink toward a fragile, but enduring peace. Despite her success in quelling religious violence, Catherine de' Medici faced one final, daunting challenge, ensuring that the Valois throne would not slip into the hands of the Guise family hardline Catholics, long scheming to seize power. By the 1580s, when her third son ascended as King Henry III, real authority lay with the Guise princes, each closely allied with the papacy and eager to eclipse the Valois crown. To counter this looming threat, Catherine turned to what she called secret political intervention. Under the guise of a new court office, the Princess of Concord, she personally oversaw a vast network of spies scattered throughout Paris, trusted confidants posing as chambermaids, clerks, and even street vendors reported every whispered conversation of the Guise lords. Clandestine letters and coded messages passed continuously to Catherine's inner circle, exposing plots before they could blossom. More than one conspiracy to abduct the young king or to manipulate royal decrees was foiled by her silent watchfulness, leaving the Guise faction wary and unsettled. At the same time, Catherine persisted in her policy of religious conciliation. She issued a provisional Edict of Nantes, granting the Huguenots the right to public worship in the provinces of central France, while maintaining stricter controls in Paris, the very heart of Catholic influence. This delicate one-hand's embrace, the other's restraint, allowed her to appear magnanimous toward the beleaguered Protestants. Even as she kept them hemmed in, the Guise, furious at any concession to heretics, found themselves caught between their own zealotry and the Queen Mother's inscrutable will. In the final years of her life, Catherine could look upon the Medici-Valois line with a measure of quiet pride. Through every twist of fate, dynastic crisis, violent uprising, ecclesiastical strife, the crown had remained firmly in her family's grasp. She passed away in the autumn of 1589, leaving behind a legacy akin to an intricate tapestry of light and shadow. Historians would dub her the Shadow Queen, for her policies, while preserving a fragile peace, also sowed seeds of resentment that would haunt generations. Catherine de' Medici's story stands as proof that with unyielding will and shrewd strategy, even a woman once mocked for her inability to bear children could rise to become the mother of the realm, upholding the throne through half a century of unrest. Her life illustrates the concentrated power of a single mind, the personal sacrifices made in the name of duty, and the steep cost of a peace founded on compromise and quiet cunning. In the hushed corridors of history, her name endures as a testament to the complex interplay of mercy and menace, devotion and deception that underpins all great rule. After the triumphant arrival of Crown Prince François II, Catherine de' Medici could have paused to savour her victory. Yet she viewed that birth not as an endpoint, but as the first movement in her grand orchestration of dynastic survival. Over the next decade, from 1556 to 1564, she bore 9 more children, each arrival a testament to her unyielding determination to secure the Valois line. Each pregnancy carried Catherine through weeks of physical exhaustion. She continued to sample every elixir and tonic recommended by alchemists. From vials of exotic spices dissolved in wine to dubious herbal blends whispered to ease conception, she endured potions concocted with rare roots and secret oils, sometimes collapsing into unconsciousness from their potency and side effects. When prayer, potion, and arcane remedies seemed insufficient, she returned to Jean Fenel's guidance, rehearsing his recommended artful positions in the solitude of her chambers until her strength nearly failed. These intimate trials, though shrouded in courtly discretion, tested her body like a crucible. But Catherine persisted, knowing that only with a brood of heirs could she thwart the ceaseless intrigues aimed at unseating her family. Of the 10 children she bore, only 3 princes survived to adulthood: Francois, Charles, and Henry. This grim statistic revealed the brutal reality of 16th century royal life, where infant mortality preyed upon the most privileged beds. Yet those 3 who did live on would each inherit the crown. Francois II reigned for barely a year. Charles IX assumed the throne amid erupting religious wars, and Henry III faced turbulent uprisings that shadowed his youthful rule. Catherine's extraordinary fecundity, achieved at such personal cost, proved indispensable in safeguarding her dynasty through one existential crisis after another. After each birth, Catherine did not merely retreat into solitude to recover her strength. She re-emerged into public life to confront the political consequences of her newfound motherhood. Court factions whispered that she drew upon forbidden arts or pagan rites to conceive so prolifically. To dispel such rumors, she organized grand Thanksgiving masses at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, inviting the papal nuncio and high-ranking clergy to witness her piety. In the vast echoing nave, she knelt amid the swirl of incense, offering fervent prayers of gratitude, while the organ's sonorous chords lifted her voice in solemn chant. These spectacles left no room for speculation. The court saw her faith in action, and the Vatican's presence in person, both affirming that any notion of witchcraft was baseless. Following the religious ceremonies, Catherine hosted sumptuous banquets at the Louvre. Tables groaned beneath gilded platters of roast swan, sugar, sculptures shaped like fleur-de-lis, and goblets filled with jewel-toned cordials. Under her watchful eye, each tray's arrival became part of a choreographed display of royal magnanimity. Guests, lords and ladies, bishops and envoys found themselves immersed in the image of a queen who, though passionate about motherhood, remained untouchable in her regal authority. These banquets functioned as political theatre, showcasing Catherine's mastery in projecting both warmth and unassailable power. But Catherine's investment in her children did not end with their births and public displays. From the moment Francois II first opened his eyes, she marshalled the finest tutors Europe could offer. She summoned learned clerics to guide him through Latin grammar and sacred scripture, ensuring he could both recite the Gospels and interpret their deeper meanings. To strengthen his mind for statecraft, she personally oversaw lessons in Niccolò Machiavelli's principles adapted to courtly decorum, so that her son would know both virtue and the ruthless realities of governance. Young Charles IX proved equally amenable to instruction, absorbing lessons in rhetoric and law that equipped him to mediate conflicts among France's fractious nobility. And Henry III, though sometimes dismissed as less vigorous, displayed a keen understanding of diplomatic nuance, a testament to Catherine's insistence that even the gentlest prince learn the art of political intrigue. Nutrition and well-being were central to the prince's upbringing as well. Catherine arranged for specialized physicians to design diets combining hearty provisions, roasted game, fresh fish, daily bread, with restorative broths brewed under precise conditions. She regulated their sleep, instituting a schedule of rest and study that balanced the rigors of princely education with the need for youthful vigor. In the palace's sunlit galleries, She established play spaces where the boys might engage in gentle exercise lances padded for safety. Balls of leather bound in velvet, ensuring their bodies grew strong enough to bear the demands of kingship. By weaving together the threads of childbirth and child-rearing, Catherine achieved two crucial aims. First, she reinforced the continuity of the Valois line through a succession of heirs that no conspirator could easily erase. Second, she cultivated an image of herself as a model, Queen Mother devoted, nurturing, and unassailable. The combination of her reproductive success and her meticulous care of her sons endeared her to the court and to the people, who saw in her a sovereign who both fulfilled and transcended her maternal role. In the soft hush of the palace nursery, Catherine sometimes paused to watch her princes at play. She listened to their laughter drift through wooden shutters, and felt, for a fleeting moment, the simple joy of a mother whose sacrifices bore fruit. Yet she never forgot that her grand design was more than personal fulfillment. It was the very foundation of France's future stability. Each lesson given, every potion swallowed, every orchestrated ceremony reinforced the fortress of her dynasty. Thus Catherine de' Medici emerged as much more than a queen who bore 10 children. She became the architect of a generation. Her relentless pursuit of heirs, coupled with her comprehensive cultivation of their minds and bodies, forged the next line of Valois kings. In doing so, she secured for herself an enduring place in history, not merely as a mother, but as the strategic designer of a monarchical legacy that would shape France for decades to come. Catherine's dual role as mother and regent was perhaps most evident in how she used her own family ties to steer the realm's politics. Whenever her young sons occupied the throne, the court would drift into factional squabbles, noble houses jockeying for influence like restless currents. To counter this splintering, Catherine cast herself as the royal peacemaker. She would convene assemblies under the vaulted ceilings of the Louvre, seating princesses and princes side by side before the assembled magnates. Then, with quiet authority, she would preside over heated exchanges. One group of nobles, voices raised, would warn of France slipping into chaos should they fail to unite. Immediately afterward, she would host a sumptuous banquet, displaying an ideal of familial harmony, her sons smiling over sweetmeats, her daughters raising goblets in toast. Through this careful choreography, Catherine sent an unmistakable message: to oppose her was to threaten the well-being of her children, and by extension, the kingdom itself. But her influence extended beyond these theatrical reconciliations. As her sons neared adulthood, Catherine recognized that religious conviction lay at the heart of French divisions. She undertook to shape their confessional stances with equal parts devotion and pragmatism. She taught them the principles of moderate Catholic faith, emphasizing charity and tolerance, while subtly weaving in Machiavellian counsel on managing Protestant subjects. When Charles IX assumed the crown, Catherine orchestrated an elaborate peace vigil between Catholics and Huguenots at the Abbey of Saint-Denis. Both sides were invited to participate in a joint liturgy under candlelit arches, a gesture Catherine framed as the king's commitment to unity, even as she quietly ensured clerical factions remained mindful of her ultimate authority. Catherine's concern for her son's welfare also shaped her foreign policy. Whenever she dispatched a prince to visit England or Spain, she accompanied him with military treaties and pledges of church support, effectively binding those courts to the Valois cause. She leveraged these guarantees to insist on equal treatment. The Habsburgs and the Tudors came to regard the Medici-Valois alliance as more than a fleeting convenience, but as a bond of mutual respect between great Catholic houses. Such diplomatic family escorts reinforced the idea that the French throne was not merely a domestic institution, but a respected partner on the wider European stage. In addition, Catherine encouraged her sons to earn their spurs in the field of battle, sending them to join campaigns against the Ottoman Turks and the turbulent imperial courts of Germany. Each time a prince distinguished himself in combat, Catherine commissioned statues and monuments In his honour, bronze plaques erected in key provincial towns. Marble slabs inscribed with his exploits. Local artisans carved reliefs of crowned youths leading cavalry charges. And her couriers distributed pamphlets celebrating these victories. With each memorial unveiled, the Valois name took on an almost sanctified glow, reinforcing the notion that Catherine was not only a nurturing mother, but also a cultivator of martial glory. Through this twin strategy of raising heirs on the throne and mediating noble factions, Catherine ensured her regental power remained unchallenged long after the early rancour over her fertility had faded. She turned her personal trials into a public demonstration of strength, showing that the very same woman once scorned for being barren could become the bedrock of dynastic stability. In the hushed corridors of royal chambers, insiders would whisper of her uncanny ability to blend maternal care with statecraft, creating a model of rulership as both tender and unassailable. By the time her youngest son came of age, the courts of Europe had come to recognize Catherine de' Medici as the supreme architect of the Valois legacy. In her quiet study, amid scrolls of treaties and volumes of theology, she had woven a future for France that balanced faith with power, diplomacy with dynastic duty. Her era of regency would be remembered not only for its crises and bloodshed, but also for its extraordinary use of familial bonds to achieve political ends. And so, Catherine's image endured as that of the great royal mother, her vision extending beyond cradle-side care to the very fate of nations. She had raised her sons not only to wear crowns, but to uphold them, to bridge chasms of belief and ambition with the steady hand of maternal governance. In the end, her legacy was that rare triumph of combining the deepest personal sacrifice with the most far-reaching statecraft, a queen mother whose methods were as surprising as they were effective, leaving behind a dynasty stronger for her watchful guidance. Yet Catherine's tale extended far beyond childbirth and royal schooling. It stood as living proof of Machiavellian strategy brought to life on the French stage. Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince had served Catherine first as a way to charm King Francis I. Then, as her guiding star for every calculated manoeuvre from her tearful performances in the Royal Council to the secret spy network she assembled, and the diplomatic feasts designed to fracture and reforge alliances. Even in raising her sons, Catherine applied Machiavelli's principle of psychological insight. She insisted that her heirs embody an air of invulnerability before the court, protecting the crown's image from any hint of weakness, while nurturing in their hearts a genuine compassion for the people. Thus young François II became known as the king who carried both sword and scroll. An image Catherine deliberately cultivated by balancing martial prowess with scholarly demeanour. He stood as the ideal monarch, a warrior and a thinker, equal parts, fearsome ruler and empathetic shepherd of his subjects. Catherine also grasped that winning hearts early would strengthen the dynasty's future. Christmas, she invited the poorest children of Paris to the palace, staging a seasonal pageant in which her princes served bread and sweetmeats to the orphaned and the destitute. She oversaw every detail, from scripting the evening's tableau to selecting the simple woolen tunics the boys would don. The sight of crowned princes gentling the hands of paupers impressed upon both the courtiers and the common folk a lesson in ruling for the people, forging an emotional bond between the throne and the masses. In negotiations with the Huguenots, Catherine employed a similar blend of politics and publicity. When she arranged for the young King Charles IX to meet a destitute Protestant widow, her story of loss and perseverance carefully circulated by court poets, she created a powerful image that cowed both sides. No Catholic noble dared press too harshly on the Huguenot minority, nor did any Protestant dare reject the king's outreach. This deft use of political propaganda synergy protected the monarchy's supreme authority, demonstrating Catherine's mastery of controlling narratives as surely as she controlled armies. In every facet of her political life, Catherine absorbed Machiavelli's ethos. No gesture was unplanned. No emotion was genuine until it had served a purpose. Though history often judges her methods as ruthless, one cannot deny that she ushered in the Catherine era, a transformative period that shaped late Renaissance France and paved the way for the absolute monarchies to follow. Under her watch, the French crown survived religious wars, noble revolts, and dynastic perils held aloft by a mother whose heart both calculated and cared, whose tears both moved and measured, whose legacy stood as testament to power's delicate dance. In the quiet hush of her final days, Catherine must have reflected on the journey she had charted from orphaned Italian princess to regent of France. From powerless bride to architect of an entire generation, the Machiavellian lessons she embraced became both her shield and sword, enabling her to shape kings, quell rebellions, and outlast the fiercest storms of her time. And so, in the ebb and flow of history's tides, Catherine de' Medici's life remains a testament to the art of political survival, proof that with will, cunning, and calculated empathy, one could harness even the coldest strategy for the sake of dynastic endurance. The story of Catherine de' Medici offers viewers profound values and messages. First and foremost, it demonstrates the power of will and the desire to overcome adversity. Once dismissed as a foreign princess, unable to bear children, Catherine never ceased her efforts. She persevered in seeking every medical remedy, employed intricate political tactics, and even wielded her tears as a weapon. It was this resilience that transformed her into the mother of the realm, preserving the Valois line through countless crises. Second, the narrative underscores the importance of strategy and long-term planning. Catherine did not simply aim for quick victories. She plotted each move deliberately, using Machiavelli as her compass, building an intelligence network, leveraging royal marriages to reinforce alliances, and deploying religion as a soft power to win hearts. From her example, we learn that leadership demands keen observation, psychological insight, and adaptability, not merely the exercise of brute strength or reliance on reputation alone. Third, the video vividly illustrates the link between personal experience and collective destiny. Catherine turned her personal anguish, her struggle with infertility, into motivation for a series of national decisions. She proved that sometimes the most painful experiences can cultivate deep empathy and guide actions for the common good. Finally, the story emphasizes that fragile peace always requires vigilant protection. Tragedies such as the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre and the wars of religion are not merely bloody chapters of history, but cautionary tales about the value of dialogue, calculated compromise, and reconciliation. Though Catherine was criticized as ruthless, she left behind a legacy of balancing authority with mercy, a formula that any leader must consider when facing division. From this video, we learn that leadership is not only about power, but also about the artful deployment of emotion and psychology. Long-term plans that integrate politics, diplomacy, and religion can create defining milestones in history. Sometimes the greatest strength arises from embracing and skillfully transforming one's own vulnerabilities. We conclude tonight's journey with a reminder: every challenge in life can become a stepping stone to success if we are willing to acknowledge it, learn from it, and act with intelligence.